how are we all doing? I'm sure you're doing great. We're learning a lot about animation basics here with After Effects, and we're going to get a little more detailed. I was just having a thoughtful moment to myself before starting this recording, and about just how deep and intense After Effects can really be. And it's like this is video number 7, and there's still so much to do, which is really exciting. But it's also just one of those like, oh my gosh, this is such a big program. That in mind, I really do suggest and highly recommend that you do go through these videos to their full extent and go through with your own work what I'm going over. It's only going to make that next video even more digestible and easier to manage, and will also help improve your work. The other thing too is like there's so many times when I'm going through these videos and then there's this little the little designer and animator on my shoulder goes like, but you forgot about that. Afterward they go, oh shoot. So maybe once in a while I'll just throw in little short things. And I tend to do that in my other classes. I just also want to say, speaking of other classes, I teach an Illustrator course. And if you've had my Illustrator course, most of you probably have, I talk about graphics tablets and how great they are. Well, guess what? They're really great for animating and doing motion graphic works in After Effects too. It's not only is it helps the flow of your movement and the way that you are handling things. It's also just so good for your bones and your muscles and those tendons. If you haven't had my Illustrator course and you're wondering what I'm talking about, just imagine always holding on to a brick versus a pencil or a pen, or always having to do this on a trackpad versus this. This is just so much more natural and way more healthy for this part of our body. So, don't let that turn into a meme. Okay, let's dive into a little bit more advanced keyframing and animation than what we had done in the previous one. I still have the same project here. So if you're using that, great. If you set up your own, see if you can use it again or just rebuild it. Again, it's just two solids in here, a background and a square. What I would like to do, though, is go through a little side trick. This is not necessarily about animating, but it is about managing our space while we animate and do motion graphics work. I want another composition based off of this one. Like, I want the same thing, but like maybe I've already done the work on the last animation one, and I kind of want to leave it or go back to it and futz with it a little bit while I move on to something new. So I'm going to go to my project bin. I'm going to select the composition that is called Animating 01, and I'm going to duplicate that. And I'm going to duplicate it by either going to the edit menu and choosing duplicate, or the shortcut, which is Command D. I love shortcuts. Command D. Since I named it Animating 01 with a number to it, After Effects just assumes that maybe I want Animating 02, and I do. Sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes you duplicate it and you're doing something completely different and you want to rename it. That's when you use the return key on your keyboard. It highlights it, and then you can call it whatever you want. So I did duplicate it. However, I am currently not in that comp. I have to double click it to open it. So there we go. I double clicked it. Now we're in Animating 2. You can see 2 tabs down here below. Maybe just to get the other one out of the way, I could close it so I don't get them confused, or you just learn to be really good about managing and being aware of what your workspace is like. So I'm in Animating 2. I'm going to select my square layer, and I'm going to start off with some position keyframing again. Then we're going to get into a little bit more elaborate work. So I'm going to hit P for position, and I'm going to take my little square and move it off screen so I don't see it at all. And I'm going to record that at frame 0. Making sure I'm at frame 0, I set my stopwatch. I've laid down a keyframe. I can see that here in my timeline, and I can also see that the keyframe indicator is blue, meaning my playhead is currently over a keyframe. So now I'm going to do sort of an elaborate timed move here. And I have 5 seconds. So what I'm going to do is at 2 seconds, I'm going to have my little square fly out to the center of my composition. How do I know where my center is? Well, I can either do the math, knowing that my coordinate, my dimension maximum is 1920. So that means half of it, we're going back to this again, is 860, 960. Gosh, math. I think I'd be really good at it. I am pretty good at it, but sometimes I just, okay, so 960, I just entered it, and now I know I'm right at the dead center. Or you can hit quote on your keypad, and it pulls up your crosshairs, and you can sort of eyeball it. I do like precision, kind of a type A sort of dude. So, all right. Now what I want to do is I want to hold. My objective is to fly across the whole screen eventually, but what I want to do is introduce my little cube, square, let it sit for a second, and then let it carry on off to the right-hand side of the stage. So that means if I want to hold for a second, I'm going to go to 3 seconds. Now I have to communicate with After Effects about saving this spot and having the same information as I did a second ago at 2 seconds, which was the coordinate of the 960. So I can do 2 things. I can copy and paste that keyframe, the one that I laid down at 2 seconds. That's easy. You select the keyframe just by clicking on it, and then you do edit copy, and then edit paste. Well, if I did a copy, I'm not doing it because I like shortcuts. And it'll paste it wherever your playhead is. So if I do Command C and then Command V, it just pasted that exact keyframe here, which means there is no change between the timing of those 2 keyframes. They're the same coordinate, same information. Now if I go to my end frame and move my square off stage to the right, it recorded another keyframe. So I'm not having to do any stopwatch stuff. We don't do the stopwatch stuff. We talked about this last time. Do it once. Sets After Effects into recording mode and records all of your actions. Perfect. So there's my 4th keyframe. 4 keyframes in one 5-second run with this little position of change of this square, and we will watch it by hitting spacebar, and it slides out, lands, holds, and then continues off screen again. So that is, a little more elaborate choreography of this square. Is it awesome? I mean, it has potential, right? But it's pretty basic. It feels like maybe something that you'd see on a very young television show about shapes and color or something like that. I can even hear like little tiny kids go, square, purple, So now what I want to do is just kind of backtrack. I'm going to select those last 2 keyframes, keyframe 3 and 4. And I did that by dragging in the empty space prior to that 3rd keyframe. And as you can see, as I drag, it highlights that keyframe. Uh-oh, my computer's going to die. And then I get that other one too. So you can select keyframes by just dragging over them. Sometimes your timeline might be really crowded with keyframes and that doesn't work. You end up clicking on the one next to it and moving it and you're like, crap. So you can also just select, hold down Shift and then select again. So I got those 2 keyframes selected again. Go away, little notice. Boop. So now those 2 keyframes are selected and I can just hit delete on the keyboard. They're gone. So I told you that you can copy and paste a keyframe. That is true. Since there is no change going on, I slide over and we stop. And at 3 seconds, I want to keep the same information. I can also use that little keyframe indicator on the left-hand side of that layer from position I can just click on it and it'll introduce a keyframe in the timeline saying, okay, you'll have a keyframe for whatever value is currently on those coordinates. So that's basically the same thing. So then I could go here to the end and then slide that off to the side, and I end up having the same deal. It goes, stops, and then continues. So that is a little bit more of elaborate choreography of a solid. I need to plug this computer real quick. Give me power. All right, so, man, I accidentally yanked the microphone plug out of the jack, and then when I didn't notice that when I started recording again, I had no audio, so I recorded a lot without any audio, and I don't want to do it again because I did a pretty good job, so I am going to narrate it. Here we go. I think that it probably just makes sense that since I am just narrating, we'll get rid of the video. Gone. Okay. So picking up where we left off, I was going to go into timing. So we're going into timing now. This animation that we just did happens in 5 seconds, but there's a chance that you might eventually say like, well, nice animation, but I need it to be quicker, or someone tells you that it needs to be quicker. So we can manage our keyframes in the timeline quite easily just by moving them around. So I'm going to take these keyframes in the middle, number 2 and 3, and just kind of slide them over for now. I want this animation to occur in 3 seconds instead of 5. So now I'm moving that last keyframe right up to my 3-second line, and you can just slide them around. It's pretty awesome. So now the animation will happen in 3 seconds, but I still need to sort of orchestrate the timing of these 2 middle keyframes here. So I'm going to move these based on what my new rhythm might be. And so since I'm at 3 seconds, I think I'll do a 1 second for the first keyframe. Just move that over there. The second keyframe. And then I'll go to 3 for the end of my pause. So now my animation all happens 1 second movement, 1 second of pause, and then another second of movement. Here we go, looking at it. Boom, boom. Pretty cool. So yeah, you could just watch this over and over again. In fact, I think that this could go even quicker. So what happens if we did it in 1 second and there were 10 frame intervals? So I'm going to move my playhead to every 10 frames and then slide those keyframes over so that it all happens in 1 second. So here we go. Nice, slick. There's a lot of dead space at the end, and we'll address that here shortly, but you can see how it's pretty nice little sliding graphic. So I could even see it in like a Sesame Street piece. You're halfway to being recruitable graphic animators for public television. That's pretty exciting. Purple, square. Now, I might want to add some more flair to the end of this or after this and start to orchestrate a more elaborate design. I want new squares, but based off of the one that I already made. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a duplicate of that square that I had made, the purple one here. And I'm going to do that by using the solids folder in my project bin. So if I select the original square asset and then duplicate it, Command D, equivalent of edit, duplicate, I now have another original version of that square. And I was about to drag it in and just drop it in there. I haven't talked to you about dragging assets from the project window into the timeline yet. We've just been making them from the solids layer window. So you can click and drag and pop anything you want from the project window into your timeline. You can see that it just pops it right in there, and it becomes a new layer in your composition. Pretty cool. So that's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is just to drag it into the composition window itself, and you have a little more control as to where it lands this time. And as opposed to when you drop it into the timeline window layer area, it just puts it right in the dead center, as if you were creating a new layer solid. So that being said, there are some particular things about the timeline method where if your playhead is somewhere else, it could end up playing a factor. If you drag your solid into the timeline window on the left side where the layers are stacked, the playhead doesn't matter where your time is. It'll just drop it right at frame 0. Same as when you put it in the composition window. But you can drag it over to the timeline window where the timeline is, and you could have it start where your playhead is. You can hold down shift and it'll snap to it. That means that it will not be a part of your performance until it actually lands. You can see where that layer started. We're going to get into that detail later. It's the ins and outs, and they really are kind of handy. So I think what I want to do is I'm just going to end up pulling that square, that new version of that square into my layers area here, and I want to change its color. So I'm going to go to layer solid settings, and I'm going to make it a nice orange. How's my voiceover doing so far? Pretty good. So now that changed the color, and it is an instance of the original in the project window. You can see that it's on top of it because of the layer hierarchy, so it obscures the purple, but it is its own little object right now all to itself. So I want this one to start up on the top right, and I'm going to open up the position, and I'm going to enable keyframes at my 1 second point. So after the other animation ends, this new one's going to begin. So 10 frames, we'll come over here to the center and wait, go another 10 frames, duplicate that, or just click another keyframe, and I'll go to another second. So now we're at 2 and it's off to the left. So now it looks like boom, 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 boom. So we're getting a little more complex in our animation. It's kind of cool. It's more life, more energy. But let's do even more of this. So sometimes you want to duplicate a layer and maintain its animated properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that layer in the timeline here, and I'm going to duplicate it. So just like duplicating a layer in the project window, you can duplicate it here, and now I've got a new instance of it. Not the original is duplicated, but just the instance of it in the timeline. So you can see that it's still the same one. It didn't make a new solid up in the project window, but it did make a new solid in the timeline. So it's the same, it's using the same artwork. So they are currently doing the exact same thing. So you won't even be able to tell that there are two of them in there. We will end up changing that so that the new duplicate will be at the bottom of our timeline. So here's what you got to do. I'm going to hit position so I can see those keyframes. And there are several ways that we can go about moving this below. So you can do it one by one, or you can do a group move, and I'll just kind of go through both of these here for you. So the first thing that I want to do is address this first keyframe and get it into a position that is towards the bottom of the screen, not towards the top. So if I think about my Y and I do some math, this says I am 214 pixels from the top. So now I want to be 214 pixels from the bottom. I know that my vertical height is 1080, so I can type in 1080 minus 214 and do the math. You can type an equation into that space, which is really cool. After Effects does the math for you. It's awesome. So now I know that coordinate now is 860. I think that's what 866. It's hard for me to read. It's so small. I even have my reader glasses on. So then I can go to my other keyframes and change those values. to be the same on the Y, because right now it's sliding up, but I want to do is keep it laterally moving across. So you want to make sure that your playhead is over a keyframe if you're going to change it. So you can see how it's blue. The little indicator says, yes, you're over a keyframe. That means that I will be able to change that value. If I use my little arrow keys, that's also a way to guarantee that I'm going to be on top of that keyframe. So I'll type in my 866, and then that changes the Y on that first one. You can see it does a wild little swoopy S deal, but it'll change once I get these other ones in. So you can also double click on the keyframe itself. So double click on the keyframe, and I'm just going to my Y value, and I'm going to enter my 866. Now I've got a completely lateral move, and the two of them are together. It's like the synchronized square moving at the Olympics. If we have a look at how this will play out, we have our purple square move over and our two orange ones swing across in the opposite direction. And it's cool. It's like we're starting to see some nice motion graphics happen here. And I'm already like thinking about commercials I've seen from these things and whatnot. So I am going to show you the other way. So I just undid all those moves. You can select all of your keyframes of a position area or a scale or whatever by dragging the box over them, and see how that selects all the keyframes. Now I can grab the artwork and move it, and it moves all selected keyframes the same way. Whoops, I just clicked on my control. So I'm going to continue moving that all the way down. It moves all keyframes, so you can see them all going down together, even though I'm at one specific point in time. And that is kind of a critical thing, because if your playhead is not on a keyframe and you try to do that, so I have all my keyframes selected, but my playhead is over here somewhere, and I go to move that artwork. Oh, it's not on this side, it's on the left, because we've already executed our move. So if I move it, you can see that it's just laying down a new keyframe. It has nothing to do with the previous ones. So undo. Your playhead has to be residing directly on top of a keyframe in order for that sort of group change to happen. And this is a wonderful shortcut. Get used to it. You're going to be using it a ton as you move down the path with your motion graphic works. All right, so what if we wanted to get even crazier with this and swap out our squares at the very end? So I'm selecting the last keyframes for each one, and now they're going to slide across and then trade places at the end. You can see how they kind of crisscrossed. You can barely see them because it happens so fast, and part of that movement is off screen. But to think about different choreographies for your work, that's really kind of fun. Now to switch it up even more, what if we make that purple square fly out, spin with rotation for that 1 second where it's just holding in that one spot, and then continue to fly off screen? I am going to make it do a full revolution in that time. And you could even do it with these orange ones if you wanted, but we're going to make the purple one spin around. I think I got a little ahead of myself. I'm talking so fast. So now if we go back to that purple square on that 10 frame and hit rotation R, I am going to initiate the keyframe process and say, hey, After Effects, I want to do rotation starting here on frame 10. So on frame 10, I click my rotation stopwatch. It's now recording. I go 10 frames forward, and I'm going to make it go one full revolution, so a full 360 degrees. And what we have is it flies out, spins one full revolution, goes off screen, and then the orange ones come back. So kind of cool. Now, what if I wanted a similar movement to occur with my orange ones? I definitely could go back to each orange one and do the exact same thing I did, where I access rotation and set down my keyframes and do one revolution and stuff. Or I can use the keyframes that I've already set up. So I just dragged over those, and I'm going to do a copy and paste. So I selected the 2 rotation keyframes, copied them, Command C, and now I selected it's the top one in the layers, but the bottom one in the composition window, and I'm going to hit paste. And I'm going to do the same thing for the top orange one. And when I do paste, you can see that it lays those keyframes down. I had to make sure that I was exactly at the right moment where I wanted them, where that pause starts. So now we have spin, spin. And it saved me a lot of time just being able to copy and paste those keyframes. If I wanted to do an inverse where these orange ones spin counterclockwise instead of clockwise, that's a very easy fix. And I can do that just with the keyframes themselves. So if I double click on the last keyframe where it says 1 revolution, I hit -1, it'll go in the other direction. So I do -1 for each of those revolutions, and now they will spin counterclockwise. Since they're coming from the opposite direction, it starts to make sense that the purple one will spin clockwise and the orange ones will go counterclockwise. So that's pretty fun. And we could even mix it up a little bit more. I'm going to get rid of the rotation by clicking on the stopwatch. I don't want rotation anymore, but I do want to play with scale. So I'm going to add scale to my group here. I'm going to start the keyframe process by the stopwatch. So at 10 frames, I have 100%. And then halfway through that, I'm going to go up to like 225 or so. And then at the end of my pause, back down to 100%. And now I get a fly out, a little bump, boop, and then the other guys come out and spin. And it's definitely looking kind of fun. It's looking fun. So this is the starting point for the motion graphic work that we'll be doing. It seems perhaps a little complicated right now. Like we're dealing with multiple attributes, multiple keyframes, moving through time, changing time, duplicating things and copying things. But it really does take practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get at these things. That's what they say about everything, right? And the same applies for here. So, make sure that you not only watch these things, but you do try them on your own. That's how you'll gain confidence and have the ability to really rock. Thanks for bearing with me through this little bit of a hacked up piece, but we're in good shape, and we'll jump into more animation and keyframe work down the road. All right, thanks.